Oh, hi everybody, and welcome to Habitat Now. I'm your host, Aaron Shea, and we are in the third month of Not Grandma's Glass, focusing on two amazingly talented artists that have collaborated and have been working together for, I would say, decades now. And it's an honor to have them both, and they both joining us today to talk about this body of work that really is uh, glass that Grandma does not have in her collection yet, but she definitely needs it, and that's what the show is all about. So far, we've had two previous entries, one being Morgan Peterson, insanely brilliant artist from Seattle, and Matatsuke, a visionary who creates trash glass. And I hope you guys have seen those talks. If not, feel free to go on to notgrandmasglass.com or visit our YouTube page. I would invite Michael and Tony to say hello. Tony, unmute yourself. I see you're still muted, so I'll try and clicking on your face.
I
There you
don't know
go.
how I became muted again.
No worries.
Hi,
Say hey,
folks.
guys.
I'm Tony. I'm the non-glass artist that's part of the glass show.
And I'm Michael Janis. I'm the glass artist that's part of the show, and that a number of you know from other presentations. And I think we can start the talk.
Yeah, I'll take it over from there, and I'll get back into that.
Okay.
We've represented Michael for a long time now, taking him to SOFA and Florida and all kinds of shows, and have done very well with his work. I personally acquired a piece of his recently from my wife for her 40th birthday, and we stand behind him. We're honored to have him. So great to have you, Michael. Great to have you, Tony. And I'm going to take over your screens right now and start this little soiree. So here we go. I'm hoping you're seeing my screen. You can see this Not Grandma Glass artwork I put together. It looks very fun, and we're getting geared up here. Little homework. We decided to keep the Splash show up online right now and continue for the month of March. It's on at glasscoastweekend.com. Still some amazing, beautiful works available. Check it out at your leisure. We're planning on a virtual show at the beginning of May 1st, celebrating 50 years of Habitat virtually. So plan for that date. And then we're trying to get together physically in September, which is September 4th, to have a physical show, partnering with museums, doing what we usually do, and trying to get everybody to get together again. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that works. We're planning an auction, as I was mentioning earlier before we started recording, hopefully for late March of this month, and I'll keep everybody updated on that. We're looking for consignments for future auctions. This one's going to be great. So without further ado, I will let Tony take it away as we proceed into the Not Grandma's Glass presentation. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yep, maximize your...
I will.
Perfect.
Got it?
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm Michael Janis, and working with me is Tony Porto. And we want to thank Aaron and Habitat for your belief in our work, and that they feel that we're kind of the taking glass in the next generation. Habitat wanted us to make works that would be something out of the ordinary and that was a unique experience and provide a little bit of a shock and awe. So Tony and I wanted to make something that was kind of colorful and with a lot of attitude. And that's what we were working on together. So we also were collaborating, so that I'm having myself as a glass artist working with someone who works in a different way, so that we really had a kind of a new form that's coming out, because it's neither me nor Tony, but it's something that's new and completely both of us at the same time.
Right. Just a little backstory. Mike and I have known each other for over 40 years. We went to school at IIT, which is Illinois Tech now, and met in freshman year, sophomore year then. And actually, we were roommates in college. So we've known each other and been good friends for years, and have actually collaborated in the past together as well. Mike went on to study architecture, and I went on to study visual design. Mike, where did you go from there?
I was an architect for 20 years. I worked in Chicago, and then my wife was recruited to an architecture firm in Australia. So I was in Australia for 10 years. And working in Australia, they have a very strong glass background, and that's where I was introduced to glass. And I really said, that's where I want to be. I'm designing lobbies of floor-to-ceiling cast glass, and going to some of the studios there, I said, this is where I want to be. So when we moved back to the US, I wanted to make my focus on glass, and that's where I've been since then. I became one of the co-directors at the Washington Glass School, and have just been exploring different ways to use glass as a sculptural medium.
And then I studied visual design and went on to co-found a graphic design firm, stayed in Chicago. I've been in Chicago my whole life. And our business is 3 Communication Design, and or 3CD for short, but we've been in business for well over 30 years. And in addition to practicing in the field of graphic design, I've created art all my life and have been doing specific types of portraiture more recently, but I've always been involved in fine art. And as I said before, though, I don't work in glass. I think I got through security here for this show, but together with Mike, I think we've got some interesting things for you. Maybe just to give you a little idea of what we're going to do. Mike and I would like to share some of our personal work first, so you get a sense of where we're coming from with the collaboration. And then once we share a little bit of that, then we're going to kind of walk you through how we created the very first piece together, because we think it's a really interesting story in terms of the actual collaboration, especially in light of COVID. And then finally, we'll take you through the pieces that comprise the show, and there are 6 of them in total. So from there, I'm going to let Mike take the reins because he's going to lead off talking about some of his own work.
Tony. My work in glass kind of balances imagery and using and really expressing the natural qualities of the glass medium. You know, I want the color, I want the translucency, I want the ability to shape objects with glass. I do like to use imagery, and a lot of people know that I create the glass imagery by using crushed glass powder that I'm sifting onto a sheet of flat glass and moving around the powder with an X-Acto to create the imagery and fusing that in. But I also like to use the other qualities of glass that really use the ability to shape this form and have translucency inherent in the glass be a major part of the artwork. Next slide. So a lot of times I'm creating portraiture within my work, and I like to explore concepts of self and how we perceive ourselves, and how in my work, how pressures from life can have an impact and our state of mind. And that a lot of our the pieces I'm going to use are going to have elements that block out you from seeing the whole object, because a lot of times we only understand a little bit of what's going on in ourselves, or that when we look at someone, we see the exterior, but we don't know what's going on the inside. So I like the idea of using something that is translucent to start expressing those categories. Next slide. I also like to use other mediums. As an artist, I don't feel as though I can be slavish to one thing, but many different forms of things will interest me. So this piece is a ceramic and glass combination, and I like making cast objects that I affix to it so that there's a different texture, and the way that light passes through those cast objects becomes part of the artwork itself. So something as ephemeral as just light passing through it creates a color and shadow onto the base form, and I just like that quality. And Tony's going to talk a little bit about his portraiture work, because we both are telling stories with our art and kind of bringing you along with that. Tony?
Gotcha. So this is an example of my work, which, as Mike said, I work in collage, and I do portraits of individuals, and the collages contain objects that relate to them and things that are important to their lives. And for the most part, I'm very close with these individuals. So they also speak to my relationship to them. They speak to the sense of humor that we share with one another. So this is a piece for a dear friend of mine, Myra, who I think is on this in this meeting. And Myra has a very, for some reason, Myra has a very soft side and a very tough side. She's a union organizer. So she's tough as nails, but she's also about boas and fur. And the elements in my collages all have, in addition to having objects, they also have elements that move and that light up and that make sound. So in Myra's piece, there's a working disco ball that actually dances to a MP3 player that's in the piece and loaded up with her favorite disco music. And I've got dreidels, and in fact, the larger dreidels are motorized and spin, and the lights light up. And there's actually a cat. She loves cats, and there's a cat. Oops, sorry. There's a cat sound toy embedded in the piece. So it's all about humor and fun and my love for the individual. This next piece is for another person who's near and dear to me. It's my son, John, who's 29 years old. But the piece is a reflection of my relationship with him throughout his entire life. John's a huge sports fan, so the piece is comprised of, he's a huge White Sox fan, so those are actually White Sox Sunday hats and rubber basketballs and images of him throughout the years. But actually, it's also embedded with tons of his original action figures, from wrestlers to Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers. But John is in his adult life is a physical therapist. So that's actually a scrolling LED that relates to the theme of the piece, which is he's got helping hands, healing hands, and that he's on the hands team, which is a joke between John and I. That was his position in football in high school. But it's also got a plasma ball that in the center here that actually lights up and reacts to touch. And the moving elements are the controllers, and actually that little guy at the top is from, some of you may recognize him, he's a character from Land Before Time. He's Petrie, and he spins. So that it moves, it makes sound, it lights up, it blinks. It's all about, oops, sorry, having a little trouble with the controller here. So it's just a composite of things that relate to John and my relationship to him. So from here, Mike and I are going to talk about what motivated us in the making of these pieces. And we both grew up in this era. So the Batman and comics, we are attached to and have a love for this sort of thing. And we talked about it. And Mike, you may want to say a few things here. I'm kind of dominating here. But
well, we talked about the things that we found important or that we remember. I mean, we're looking a little bit back on a nostalgic vein, but we're also saying that a lot of these elements, these cultural icons, they are things that we identified with, and in a sense, they are part of what created us as who we are. I mean, you know, all of these kind of shows were things that, as growing up, you would identify with, and you would love, and you would have a favorite person, you would have a favorite comic, and part of that becomes part of your background.
Also add that it's not you alone, right? Everybody has a story.
No, everyone has a reaction to this stuff, and it may not be, you know, Star Wars may not be your thing, but I don't think there's anyone that can't relate to some sort of figure or TV show that ends up having characters associated with it. And so we just immediately connected to all of that stuff. And that, coupled with sort of my interest in the action figures, as you saw in my piece for John, I've done a lot of pieces that have different types of action figures in them, and they're just so cool. And people, again, just react so dramatically to them. So that sort of was the seed of what our motivation was. But now I'm going to circle back to a piece that is Mike's, and actually a collaboration between him and Tim Tate, his partner at the Glass studio. And I had the fortune of seeing this at the Habitat show a couple years back before COVID. And kind of a light bulb went off in my head because I saw how Mike was collaborating with someone. And he and I had been talking for years about doing something together. And originally, I think we thought what that would be is me coming out to DC and, sitting at his knee and having him teach me how to make glass. And I think that kind of realized that, first of all, I didn't want to sit at his knee. But secondly, it was less about learning how to make glass for me and more about finding an excuse to work together. So this was sort of the seed of an idea of how we might be able to work together. So from here, I sent Mike this, and this was a sketch of an idea I had for how we could maybe work in that similar way that he worked with Tim, where maybe I do something that we create panels with action figures, and then he responds to them with panels that are made of glass and have the sounds of the Batman figures, from Pow to Zap to whatnot. So I sent him this, and I actually have to say that he was interested, but he had his plate full with a lot of crap, and he was basically saying, yeah, that all sounds good. Why don't you take the first step and give it a try? Because I think he wanted to see how committed I was to working together and whether it was something that I was all in on. And of course, I really was. And so I started to find these action figures. There's my primary source for them early on is there's a collectible store like a mile from our office, and they have bins of very cheap action figures just thrown together, mishmashed together. And I started to just kind of buy them, and I was buying things that I was reacting to visually. They were just very cool in many different ways. But again, being the graphic designer, I started to kind of sort them out in terms of color. So I wasn't being true to like, these are all Star Wars or these are all Batman. I was just reacting to what was cool in color and trying to find a way that I could adhere them to panels and create a piece of this whole. And so even I think the first one that I sent Mike, again, he was all enthusiastic, but I don't know if he was fully in. But so I just kept doing them, and I did the 4 pieces that I thought we needed to make the first thing. And by then he was in too deep. He had to do something. So from here, we're here. I sent him these things. The first step was, how do we make these Pow and Bam things? And my first thought was, I went on Etsy, and these are actually cookie cutters. So you can make cookies with these. And I thought, well, let's give this a try. And I sent them to Mike, and I'll let you take that from here, Mike.
Well, yeah, we were starting to look at these things, and I said, well, I can do a casting with those kind of words. But the way that those cookie cutters were, they didn't give the greatest quality. They weren't quite the best clarity. But I was going to still say, well, we can work it out later what it is, but let's see how they read in glass. Let's see what colors, what color palette we're working with, how much detail is enough detail to compete with these action figures that are very strong and very textural. But I wanted to have a very punchy cartoon bubble that says Pow or Bang or Biff. All of those things are just equal in weight. So pandemic had set in. So now we're kind of feeling long distance and saying, we can't really communicate, but I'll make a piece. We'll do a FaceTime. I'll mail you a component.
Right.
And
so
say,
I have slews of these that he sent off to me, and we were talking about problems with each of them, but I think we both agreed that they just weren't clear enough. They were too over detailed, and the glass couldn't really pick up on them. So we kind of went back to the drawing board on these. And again, being the graphic designer, I basically started over and created shapes that had fewer points that we thought the glass could actually pick up on the detail of. And I'm fortunate enough to have a nephew who's also a fine artist, who may be on this call too. His name's Chris Riley, and he has access to a laser cutter. So he helped us out and laser cut these forms that were much more clear. And I sent them off to Mike, and he took them.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he sent me all the components, because I wanted to play backwards and forwards of negative and positive and what reads in glass and what doesn't read in glass, so I could start doing test studies of castings that, again, I'm going to be photo documenting and then later on sending out to him to say, Tony, the one thing we see in a photograph, you got to actually hold the object to say that's what it looks like. And we like the way that the forms were coming out of the glass. This is the technique that I make a lot of the components along with Tim, which is a technique called dry plastic casting. We're firing inside a kiln, so it's not ladle cast, but you get so much texture and so much information using cooked pottery plaster that's inside a dam. And you just get a lot of preciseness, but for this, it was all about the quality of the image. And then the colors we're using became the next thing, saying, what are the color palettes for these action heroed works? And then how much is too much, and where are you being too pristine by saying it's just the purity of the glass? Can we have some additional emphasis? So I started trying enamels with it to get a really strong coloration with it.
But we obviously we were trying lots of different colors and lots of different ways of applying tint after the forms were cast. And the thing that we both agreed on from the start is we liked sort of the roughness of these. We wanted something that was in contrast to the action figures, you know, and the clarity of the action figures. And there's sort of like a molten plastic quality to these shapes that we both were attracted to. So they're not pristine, they're a bit more raw.
Mhm.
In addition to that, we started looking at the central piece that the thought was we needed something to center the overall design. And I found a 12-inch action figure and took the arm off of it, and we thought it could be bursting out of the glass. And so Mike tackled that problem of how to make that work.
Also in our studio, I have someone who works a lot with recycled glass, and Erwin Timmers has buckets of tempered glass that I said, let me start firing sheets of tempered glass to just get that broken through effect. And then I would start sending photographs of Tony saying, here it looks like it's just punching right through.
And he was even looking at colors behind the fist, and we ended up deciding that making it more colorless. I think that's a mirrored surface, right, Mike?
Yeah, that is.
What you're seeing on the right-hand side are actually all the pieces loose, not mounted into the piece of art, because part of it that we were sharing back and forth was even how far apart should these panels be where they're still distinct, but they're holding up as a single cohesive work of art. And this is an example that we thought they were just too far apart. They were just too loosey-goosey. So from here we have the first final product, the first piece, and this is it in its final form. BAM isn't just an exclamation, that's the title for the piece. We've titled it BAM. And we will look more closely at it here. So you can see Mike's glass work and the idea of filling it in with black color, it very much like a comic book form, which we liked a lot. The action figures, just to give you a sense for, there's about 75 action figures in this piece. And they're all, I had to find kind of a balance in terms of what was the right distance off the panels. So basically each of them are sort of cut above the knees, which gave me enough surface to actually screw them into the panels securely. So we were laughing, we were going through this yesterday, and Aaron brought up the fact that I must have a bucket of superhero legs, which I do. So at some point there's going to be a piece of just legs.
Yeah. Well, this piece, I'm going to also point out, the overall dimension of it is 24 inches by 24 inches. And these things project out about, I'd say about 7 inches or 8 inches out from
Right, right.
a nice size, but it's not giant.
Right.
But when you do go by it, just the texture of all those different figures really makes the thing very tactile. You do almost want to start repositioning the hands.
And you can in fact. I mean, we're always playing with the hands. So,
and also going to point out that I started taking some of these images and talking with different places, and that's where Aaron got interested and said, can you make a whole series?
And that sort of lit a fire underneath us. We were definitely interested in doing more of this, but when we were seeing other people's reactions to it, we're like, hey, we've got something here that's really cool. Other people love it as much as we do. Let's just keep making more. So from here, we move on to our next inspiration, Star Wars, which we were both, you know, especially the first three, we were both connected to them deeply. And honestly, the ones since then I had to sit through. The subsequent 3 with my son, some of the worst acting ever to take place, but great characters, great
characters. And it's really changed so much in pop culture. I mean, how movies are made, how merchandising is made. I mean, it's almost a spiritual story that is in the Star Wars over that you just really have some way into it.
Right.
And I do like the idea of doing these mixed media components too, because I think mixed media is the way of art in the future, where it is not all one media, but actually is a little bit of everything to really tell a story.
So that leads to our second piece, which is Lunchtime with Darth. And what we have here, again, kind of started with the action figures. I got a greatest hits lineup of the action figures. So you've got everything from Luke and Leia and Han and Darth and Chewie and Lando, all emerging from this Star Wars lunchbox. It's a vintage lunchbox, but it's actually a remake. So no vintage, truly.
Very, very important. Very important.
Yes, I did not destroy anything of value. It's an Amazon purchase for about $10. But we've made them emerge from the lunchbox, and then Mike went around, and so here's a detail of what you're seeing there. But Mike went around and created these fabulous panels, which are oversized characters, some of which I sent to him, some of which he went off on his own and got. And Mike, you might want to talk about a couple of them that you had to modify.
Again, the overall dimension of this piece is about 24 by 24, and the lunchbox was a great centerpiece, but I almost wanted to surround it with cast glass and start referencing that whole Han Solo being frozen in carbonite, only now I can put Darth Vader and a stormtrooper, and yes, Yoda in carbonite. But some of these figures, you had sourced some of these very large figures to say that's what I'm putting in there. But a couple of them I had to actually make partially out of clay to get the read that I wanted for what we're doing in casting. And I just love the way that the colors could be part of it, the texture, and almost the formality of a graphic novel that we're telling that story.
Right. We were talking about surrounding the lunchbox with cells from a comic strip, from a comic book. And that's kind of the organizational quality of what Mike did around it.
I am going to point out with the Death Star being in glass, anyone who walked through our studio as I was working on this would pretty much stop and do a double take and say, "Oh my God, is that the Death Star?" And just to have that kind of reaction, again, we're saying we're onto something. I actually had someone who was doing public art, and we were talking about the seriousness, but they just were focused on saying, art can have fun too. And that now that was his only interest in talking about the works that were on the table rather than the ethereal nature of public art.
So from here, we pivoted a little bit. We thought, again, we love action figures. We didn't grow up during this period of time of My Little Ponies, and can't say we have the same connection to them, but there's the same quality of that, and there are people who are just as avid about this series of kooky little characters, and they all have very unique personalities. And to me, they all come off looking like little pieces of candy. They're very engaging. So we thought, okay, let's take this idea in another direction and give it a try. So we have "Friendship is Magic," which is actually the tagline for the My Little Pony series. And what began the process was I started by collecting. Most of these were through eBay. There's some serious collectors of My Little Pony stuff. And I started to purchase them on eBay and then sort of organize them by color, because I was, again, just responding to the graphic quality of them. And I needed a vehicle to kind of place them on. And I found, again, online, my wife loves all my Amazon shopping. Again, online, I found these little, these great unicorn tiaras that are all glittery and sparkly and have flowers on them. And I surrounded the discs that had the My Little Ponies on them and surrounded them with feather boas and sent Mike this star of these characters and said, what do you want to do with this? And
yeah, I want to just point out, I received a box of all these little ponies. Actually, it was my wife, Kay, who opened it up and says, what are these? And pretty much it's like, okay, how do I tell a story with that? And I mean, each one was almost a challenge too, because he feels that I'm very constrained and very conservative in my works. And so I'm getting tiaras with boas and saying, now make a serious piece of art with that.
Well, and Mike's response to it, I thought, was right on point, because what he did was he responded to the central star we created by creating other stars and then casting larger ponies and putting them in the negative spaces. The other thing that we tackled was sort of what goes in the middle of this, because initially he had placed a pony the size of one that was on the outside in the center, and we thought it was just dominated by the other pieces. So essentially we went back to the drawing board and we purchased a 12-inch pony. This is Rainbow Dash, by the way, for anyone who's got a handle on the collection. But it's a 12-inch pony that, Mike, you want to talk about the challenge of that?
Well, I'm going to say go back to the overall slide. And I mean, I like a lot of things about My Little Pony. I like the way that they're including everyone. It's a very inclusive series that talks about, you know, it kind of breaks down the gender stereotypes, and it says a lot of people identify with it. Not the least being these adult men who call themselves bronies and do all sorts of conventions and dress up like that. So
moving on.
Yeah, we have to move on. We cannot go deeply into that, but there is a whole subculture out there.
Yeah, but I do like that the way that I can pull apart these images, and for all the surrounding ponies, they're all lost wax process, so they have all the detail of the original ponies. And the center one, when we agreed that it has and that had to be made out of a stronger element, that was a big casting. And we were also saying that let's do it as dimensional as possible, deal with the annealing time for a large pink pony that'll be projecting out of there. But Tony also said, can you make it so that it almost feels like there's glitter constantly going across these pieces? Because it is all about this kind of magical nature. And I'm saying, is it acrylics? Is it you know, some other kinds of way to get that kind of feel? And I ended up using, for the background, it's glass that's fired with micas in it, gold micas in it, to really give that sparkle.
Well, and this is one that we thought that there's the further out we go, the better. There was no losing with being more outrageous with this piece. And I think Mike pushed it along very nicely. So from here, we're taking a swing completely in the opposite direction with a high level of testosterone. Pro wrestling has characters in it that essentially are living action figures and superheroes. And again, a whole culture out there and a whole world of action figures in this universe. And we thought, let's play with these two. And here we have Say Your Prayers and Take Your Vitamins. And that's actually a quote from Hulk Hogan.
Hulk, yeah.
Who we've woven into this piece as well. So there's actually kind of three primary bands through this piece. The central one being actually Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan in a wrestling pose. The top one being the WWE belt, which actually is a toy I sent to Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, he sent it to me, this large belt, and I'm saying, how do I cast this in glass? And I used a diacrylic to kind of get that quality. But then after I've done casting it, then I was wearing it around the studio, so I could be one of the wrestlers. It was a little bit small because I think it was for a kid, but you know, duct tape fixes that.
Hey, whatever you got to do to wear that baby. So the third component was actually sort of the beginning of the process too, with the action figures again. These are larger than the other ones on the other piece. The standard action figures for wrestlers are about 9 inches tall, and they're amazingly detailed. And these are all real people. These are all modeled on real wrestlers in the wrestling universe. And the first thing I did when I collected these was I consulted with a friend who's deep into the wrestling culture, and I had him vet them to make sure that none of these characters have done prison time or anything inappropriate. But they haven't. They're all real. And then from there, we were really picking things that had a variety of costuming, a variety of ethnicities, just different kinds of characters that attracted us. And then the idea was, okay, these guys, again, just like the other action figures, they want to emerge from something. They want to pop out of something. And so the containers I found, these are actually supplements that you can buy for bodybuilders. So that whole world, and again, I consulted with my friend who's part of the wrestling world, and he basically said, you know, you're fine. Those are not steroids. Those are supplements. You're not poking, you know, your eye into people who are into wrestling. Everything is cool there. So, you know, you've got Testo Boost and Animal Rage, which you can buy. And in fact, probably one of the most expensive features of any one of these pieces. They cost a fortune. And anyway, they were worth it for the containers that house the figures.
Now, the overall dimensions of this piece, it's about 18 inches wide by 24 high. And when we talked about composition, which we really went back and forth a lot about how we should be presenting this, because we had gone through many iterations of how do you tell the story in one panel of our love of wrestling. And what we actually went back to was some of the objects that Tony started finding, which was with Hulk and Andre the Giant. That really talks about the whole WrestleMania, that whole thing in like the 80s. And I think they had a huge confrontation in WrestleMania 3. And I think it was actually the other way around, where Hulk tried to pick up Andre the Giant and grab him a handful of Andre.
Yes. If you look at the pictures, there's a disgusting, I think it took everything the Hulk could take to lift him. And there is a key shot of the Hulk with his hand halfway up Andre's ass, trying to lift him.
Yeah. So I just said, let's do it a little bit different balance.
We changed history. We changed history.
But I like the idea of almost saying that they've turned into some kind of deity figure by being in the central and silvering them as an object of almost mythical proportion. And the way that that really kind of plays off the colors of the found objects with the dichroics and the irids that I'm using as the background glass as well. I think it really works as a great composition.
So we're going to move on from this one. Again, swinging another way. These are female superheroes that we grew up with, knowing and loving. But
like Yvonne, who doesn't love Yvonne Craig?
Who wouldn't love her? But moving a little bit forward in time, there's actually a series. These are DC Comic teen superheroes, which again was very appealing to us. And there's a series of action figures of these teen girls. They're both heroes and anti-heroes, and they form the basis of this piece, which is Supergirl's Night Out.
I mean, the women in action figures have always gotten the short shrift. It's always been a boys' club. You have Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. They're always the male figures. And if you ever see a female figure in most of those comics, they're the girlfriend that needs to be rescued. And in this way that we're looking at it, we're saying that the women figures, the female figures, they could be armed and dangerous now. They could be the ones who are taking care of business.
But there was some quality to them and the way we arranged them that felt like they were at a club. They were at a club and ready to dance. And why not arrange them around oversized glass diamonds and put them on fur and have them at the club and let the male superheroes be literally boy toys. They are window dressing. They are cage dancers for the girls who are out on the town.
And you know that Batman has some moves because he does know the Batusi.
That's true. That's true. So I'm going to back up though, and we'll look at this piece overall, because this is one piece I would encourage everyone to look at on the website, because we've actually included videos of all of these on the website so that you can see them and move around them and see them from all angles. Because essentially what's happening here is the central piece is a working disco light that when you plug it in, you can sync any music to it, and it will dance and light and move and rotate light throughout the piece. And then Mike mounted the superhero guys. The backgrounds are mirrored surfaces. So between the diamonds in the center of the girls and the mirrors behind and mirror balls behind the superhero men and the disco light, the thing dances and moves and glows and is pretty cool, pretty cool. And like I said, it suffers in this context because you're not seeing that sort of movement that's below here.
What's on the tables? You said they were glass diamonds?
Yes, those are glass diamonds.
Very fun.
So it's like they're having a club circle where they're dancing together. Their persons are underneath the table and they're keeping out any strangers that they don't want to come in.
Yeah.
The guys are just cage dancing and they're working it.
Yeah. Yeah. So from here, we're going to move on to the last piece and circle back to probably our greatest love again is the Batman series, the TV show, and the Bat Phone and Commissioner Gordon and our love for that. And even the series, the generation of Batmen or Batmans, you know, from the TV Batman to the more brooding Batman in more recent movies and TV. And that leads us to Call for Bruce Wayne, which is a piece that has a ledge built into it. And on that ledge, again, I had this collection of more contemporary Batman figures, and I just wanted a bat phone. And again, on Amazon, you can find pretty much anything. So this is a stylized bat phone that Mike and his partner went and embedded LEDs in it, and it lights up and blinks, and it's triggered when you approach it. So it will turn on as you approach the work of art.
Great.
The original, the component that Tony had sourced had the tiniest little diode in there. And Erwin Timmers, my studio, knows a lot about electronics, and he was able to rewire it to allow for LEDs to come from within and give it a little bit stronger punch to it, so that the Batmen or Batmany are dancing around or parading around the important glowing bulb as it lights up with a call from Commissioner Gordon so that they can respond.
Right. And then this Mike's piece is really creating this wall of color with the Batman we know and love, with the TV Batman from the 60s.
The Adam West, yes. They're all Adam West, and I really wanted it to be as pop 60s referenced as possible. And I wanted the color palette to be looking like it's an Andy Warhol multiple print, only in dimensional. Whoop.
Oh, wrong way.
And I just like the way that color could really be an important part of it and have the dimension and have Adam West just looking on as he continues to grow, to smile from beyond. But it also is a little bit different that the texture of each of those is not perfect. And I wanted to embrace the Andy Warhol quality where there is some decay as you go from element to element. So there's a texture to it.
Again, that's what we both were drawn to, is that the glass was not pristine. There's kind of a molten quality to this that is a good contrast to the finish of the action figures. So from here, I think I showed my hand here. I'm having a little trouble with the controller, but we're going to finish here with, this is a photo of Mike and I back in 1979. And though our hairstyle and our looks have changed and aged a little bit, I don't think our sense of humor has changed one bit. That's me with a mouthful of banana mugging for the photographer. But again, our relationship is always been fun and funny, and we think that's what we were working towards on these pieces. And then the last scene here is a command from Darth to either go to the dance floor or visit the website. And we encourage you to do it because, again, we've got videos of each of these where you can actually rotate around them because you can't physically be in the space and see them. I think the videos lend a lot of information about what they look like dimensionally. And you could actually look at all the details you've seen that we've shared with you today too.
And I do want to say, Tony, I'm really impressed at how you found a disco Death Star that just, you know, lights up our universe.
Again, anything on the internet. So I think that's it for us, and I'll stop sharing. And Aaron, you can.
Please
Oh,
do.
never mind.
So we invite questions, but I'm gonna kick through. I'm gonna show you some of the pieces on my screen just so you can see them. It shows you dimensions as well, and I'll take you to their website too. So, BAM, the first piece we saw, 24 by 24. Multiple different colors. He really put time and effort into finding the colors that worked well for the action figures. And someone asked during the talk if the action figures were glass, and this is Tony's part. They are not glass. They are sourced action figures, modified and securely mounted to the actual artwork.
Yes,
so they will never.
All sawed with a scroll saw above the knee, so there's plenty of surface for the screws that the multiple screws that are holding them in place.
Tell you that this is the problems of the future, making the mixed medium work for you, and they really nailed it. And then of course, Lunchtime with Darth Vader, 24 by 24 by 7. I'm sure these action figures cost a lot of money. Everybody's diving into Star Wars nowadays.
Can I say one thing about one of the action figures? I actually had one action figure ended up on the cutting room floor. The Leia.
Someone mute yourself, please. Thank you.
Oh,
go ahead.
Am I muted? No.
Nope, you're not muted. Go ahead.
The Leia figure that I initially bought somehow looked like a Han Solo they repurposed with just the hair glued on. So I actually went back and bought a fairly expensive Leia. She cost $17. Again, my wife's going to be pissed, but it alone cost $17, but she was worth it. She's a pretty Leia on this piece.
How heavy on average are these pieces? We got a question from at the chat.
I'd say that the overall piece, like for this one, because you've got cast glass, it's probably about 30 pounds.
Gotcha. So these are all hung on a cleat?
Yep.
On
Very
the mount.
close, so you just essentially put on the cleat and it just pops right on. Done.
Gotcha. And the ones that, like this one that run electricity have a plug that plugs in just like it normally would. And if you wanted, you could have your electrician wire it to your house. I'm sure it'd be the same thing.
It's a very simple cord, just a straight down. For this one, it's a black cord that drops down. Very simple. Same thing on a cleat, pops right onto the wall.
Right, and simple to operate in the sense that it's just got an on-off switch right on the light itself.
So people are asking the price points of these works. So I can tell you they run, I have it on my robot here, they run from about $8,000 up to $11,500 retail. So you can contact me for what prices are which. Happy to provide the details for that anytime on any of the pieces. And you know, if you're interested in one of them or all of them, let me know. They are, you know, they range about 24 to 20 by 20. This one's I'm missing the X there, but they have a lot of detail in each and every one, something to explore. And when someone comes into your house and sees these, it's such a breath of fresh air in a way where work can identify beyond the regular glass collection or art collection you have. The Take Your Vitamins piece they mentioned, 24 by 18 by 7, wall mounted. This one looks like it has a little shelf on the bottom. Is this correct?
It does. It has an aluminum shelf that projects out about 7 inches, and that's what holds up the different jars.
Gotcha.
And then the glass is also a dichroic, so as you walk by, it shifts from the gold color to a greenish tint, depending on what your angle is.
Very fun. I have that Andre the Giant figure next to me. You can't see it because of my background, but I actually had that figure from my childhood still in its box. And had I known, I would have lent it to Mike for this project. So, but it's still in its box, though.
I don't know if you'd want to do that.
He got all greased up in order to make it casting. You had to lube him up to make that casting.
Oh yeah. So I'll keep him in the box then. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And then obviously the call for Bruce Wayne, 20 by 24 by 10. I'm gonna take you guys to their website. So let me, before I stop sharing, I want to show, basically how the Not Grandma's Glass website works. Visiting Not Grandma's Glass, we scroll down and the newest exhibition is on top. Tony and Michael, this will be a link to the talk we're doing right now, and this is a link to their exhibition. So please take some time. I put the link in the chat to go see their work, see their videos, and check out these new pieces. They did an amazing job putting this together for this presentation for the March for Not Grandma's Glass, and I'm honored to have you both in. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask away.
Yeah, by all means.
People are enjoying the presentation via chat.
Question.
It looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, please join us.
Oh, Tony and Mike, when you are creating beautiful pieces like this, fine art, do you ever run into any issues with the owners of the copyrights on all these figures? Yeah, I know like Disney is feverishly protective of their images and their creations. Does that ever create an issue for you?
Well, we are using it as an artwork, and there is a thing called fair use, which allows artists and other people, if they're making a commentary, if they're telling a story with it, it allows them to reference those pieces and in artistic sense. We're not making, like, say, a child daycare center where we're painting a giant Mickey Mouse and implying that somehow Disney is approving this. These are actually statements on the cultural milieu that it all fits in. So that is under the copyright law of fair use.
It's good that you asked that, Gene, because, we've actually been asked that before too. Like, are there any boundaries here? But no, it's essentially, I mean, if you think about it, it's sort of like, other artists use, Andy Warhol and the soup cans.
And the Campbell soup.
Yeah. So it's kind of falls in that same sort of category that we're not mass producing these to sell them and compete with them.
Right. They're not making Bat Guy and selling it at Walmart next to Batman.
Yeah. But it's a good question, and
Yeah.
we've been asked that many times.
Question, what was the biggest benefit and challenge beyond Tony's ordinary personality of working with someone who had no experience working with glass?
That has to be someone that knows. If I find out who asked that question.
It was privately sent to me, so you were out of luck.
All right. Well,
Well,
Mike,
part of it is going to say that Tony's saying, can't we do this? And can't we do that? And I'm going to be looking at it saying, in another universe, maybe if I was spending 24 hours a day to just focus on that, perhaps. But I'm going to say, this is how I can achieve it with the kilns in my studio, and to say, I can do it, and let me explore it. So some of these things too, Tony would look at the pieces I'm making and saying, can't it be a little bit this way? And I would look at it, and we are working in collaboration. So it isn't just me or just Tony. And sometimes he's making points that I'll say, I never thought about it, taking it that way. And so it's a matter of saying, let me explore it this way then.
yeah. Well, the whole Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan figure took us a long time to kind of work through. And again, I never actually was in the same space that he was making these in, but initially Mike had detailed it in a way that it was very clear. He wanted the Hulk Hogan shirt to read real well. So he had very clearly detailed it and painted it. And I was kind of feeling like it looked too much like a model, like a plastic model, like a model you would make. And it was beginning to kind of compete with the action figures where it was sort of at that same level. So we talked more about it, and he ended up toning it down and painting it over more, so it just was more subtle and not competing with the actual figures themselves. So it's sort of trying to find that balance between what he was doing and what I'm doing too.
Yeah, he actually, on that one where Tony's talking about, he actually, no artist ever likes to be told, I don't really like it. So when he's telling me that, I'm picking it up, and I happen to have just finished silvering a lot of those components. And I thought, he's actually right. And by the end of the phone conversation, I had silvered over the tunic that he's wearing and took a photo. And Tony was saying, you did this just now, like as we're talking. I'm saying,
Right.
well, yeah, if you're doing it and you actually kind of agree, might as well go. I could always change it back, but I can't really. I wanted to, while I had him, deal with it right there. That is a challenge when you're dealing collaboratively over 700 miles apart. You don't have a chance to really nut things out. You have to do it and then have the other one review. And if I have them, I want to do it right then and there.
Well, and to drive that point even further, I have never actually held any of the final product in my hands. They're all in Mike's studio. He does the final assembly. And we actually thought at this time things might have calmed down and I could have flown out there and actually, you know, done the last thing, but I've never actually physically held any of these in my hands. I've just done the pieces and we've sent them back and forth to one another. And so if they fall off, if a hump falls off, it's him, it's that guy, not me.
So with this body of work, I can easily imagine going to an art fair, you know, and especially in this day and age, and seeing these works in a very contemporary booth, pushing, you know, art in general beyond pushing the medium. And that's what I really felt when I saw the first few of these come down the pipeline, that this was something exciting and important to be part of this, the changing art world. The way people buy art nowadays is changing, and the way people display art is changing. And I'm really happy that all of us could join today to look at this body of work, whether you like it or don't, it's important. And I think it's very, very fun, and people seem to be relating to it. They're posting quotes in the chat about Star Wars, and they have a personal experience with all these pieces. So I want to thank you guys again for joining us today. And if you have any more questions, this would be the time. And if we're
I have one, Tony.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, great job. So impressive.
Thanks.
Most of these spurred from your own passion and memories. And I'm sure as artists, that's where you get your inspiration. What if someone came to you and said, this is my passion, could you make one of these for me?
Absolutely.
Would you be able to do it since it's not flowing from your own?
Absolutely. I think the fact that we even delved into the My Little Ponies, that's a world I have no connection to, and neither do John and Ann, my kids. So we're just reacting to the characters and how compelling they are. And something tells me it might be a G.I. Joe theme, Jay.
Beatles or G.I. Joe?
Yeah. That's actually one that's on the back burner for us, because we both, as you know, we love G.I. Joes, and I can go back to the blizzard of 1967 when we took your skiing G.I. Joe out to the snowdrift expecting him to ski, and I was so disappointed that he didn't actually ski, he just fell over. So
That's so funny.
stuff like that. I mean, everybody has things they remember in their past, and I would think we'd be able to connect with any of that. I mean, because even if you don't have that emotional link to them, you can react, you know, emotionally to the characters themselves. And
People are throwing out ideas in the chat about $6 Million Man, Thundercats,
any one of
He-Man.
those. Well, and I will tell you another one that we've kind of started to talk about too is Game of Thrones has excellent characters. And wouldn't you love to see, you know,
Right.
the dragon eggs in glass and those characters, and or Jon Snow's sword with, you know, I just feel like there's limitless things we can play with here.
Yeah, my kids would love Trolls. Someone mentioned Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of potential here. If you're thinking of something, you know, that can bring joy to your life when you smile at, and these two are amazing at working together, incorporating it, making your vision of fine art. And that's fantastic. And someone mentioned The Simpsons too. It's never ending. You know, you can have
it really is. It
you
really
can have a whole decor in your house. And if, I remember there's people that decorate around. They have a theme pinball machine, or they have childhood stuff. You know, they can incorporate your stuff too.
All of the video stuff, that's also a whole niche that has very strong iconic elements that you could start pulling apart. We chatted briefly about doing the Barbie and then focused on Ken and Skipper and their.
Well, and I was just to torture Mike. I was going to make him do glass castings of Ken's bulge, that smooth over bulge. That'll be the central.
Moving on again. Someone mentioned the Jensens, the Flintstones.
Everybody knows I always walk that fine line of being inappropriate.
Yeah. Well, good guys. Well, thank you guys, and thank you everybody for joining us today for this Habitat Now and Habitat Talk. It was great to be able to just discuss this. We had a great turnout. We had over almost 100 people show up today. So thanks to everybody who came today. And like, if you have any questions about pricing individual pieces, contact me at aaronhabitat.com. happy to provide it, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Well, thank you all too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Go to the Janice Porto website.
Yes,
See the movie.
definitely. The site will be up. It will continue to be able to offer their works from now on. So it's great that they put this together. So thank you for this presentation today, guys. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Great collaboration. Lovely.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, no problem. Unmute yourself and say
Beautiful.
goodbye, everybody.
Yes,
Feel
thank
free.
you. This was so much fun.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda. Good to see you.
Thank you. So great.
Good seeing you.
All right,
Ellen
guys.
Myra Weiss.
Yeah, very nice, guys. Yeah, I saw some of the pieces. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.